If you go, you're not gonna care about anything. Not the ship, not Soren, not me, nothing. All you'll want is to stay in the Nexus.
Before I get too deep into this conversation, let me be beyond clear. This is an interesting theory that I had been thinking about and doing some research into for a while. I'm not really a huge fan of the unwarranted hate towards disco-era Trek these days, nor am I interested in feeding into it. If you're on par with the hatred that comes out of the fandom menace, go find some other channel that'll tell you some 4chan post that will literally be shown to be a hoax that you'll just ignore, thus proving you're worse than Anita Sarkeesian. I really don't need it. With that out of the way, let's take a look if the show Star Trek Picard is actually just Jean-Luc in the Nexus. Before we can delve too deep into the world and atmosphere of Star Trek Picard, let's take a look at Jean-Luc before those events happened. His frame of mind and how he became a part of the Nexus.
Please.
In Star Trek Generations, the crew of the Enterprise find that they have to stop a mad scientist from destroying several different stars. The destruction of these stars will result in the deaths of at least one civilization and will cause massive instability. This mad scientist, known as Soren, is destroying said solar bodies so that he can get back into a phenomenon known as the Nexus. It's apparently like space heaven. Or at least we think it is. More on that in a second. While all of these events are happening, Jean-Luc Picard discovers that his nephew, Rene, has died. The captain, not having children of his own, had realized that he would die at some point soon in the future, and he had looked to his nephew to carry on the bloodline. With the lad dead, well...
He's a dreamer. Imaginative. So very gentle.
He wasn't taking it well. This is all set up for what we're going to see happen in the Nexus itself. However, I also want to pause here.
If you go, you're not gonna care about anything. Not the ship, not Soren, not me, nothing. All you'll want is to stay in the Nexus.
We are told that the Nexus is wonderful and that you will never want to leave. That's all well and good, but is it the truth? All we really have to go on is what Guinan tells us. We take her word for it. But it is also possible that the Nexus simply reflects your hopes and dreams, as well as your fears and concerns. Remember, in Picard's ideal world, he still sees things that remind him that this is the Nexus. If it were perfect, and it was everything he wanted so much that he'd never want to leave, he wouldn't have these reminders. I almost wonder if the Nexus works similar to what we see in the simulated world in Voyager's The Thaw.
The system was designed to be adaptive, to observe and respond to our thoughts and adjust the environment to our wishes. Who wished him up?
It happened over months without our even realizing it. All of us had fears about survival, recovery. We never anticipated the computer would manifest those fears into him.
In that episode, the system originally was created to give the people everything that they could ever want. However, their subconscious fears of what the system could do turned everything into a nightmare. What if the Nexus worked the same way? That it literally would give you what you wanted, but could also feed off of your subconscious fears. It makes sense if you think about it. With the knowledge of what had just happened to him, let's take a look at Picard's life after he is engulfed in the ribbon. After forcing the audience to watch two elderly men just beat the hell out of each other, which is just sad, Jean-Luc Picard finds himself in an alternate reality where both his nephew is alive and he also has children and a wife.
Cup of Earl Grey.
That would be perfect.
Apparently, in the moment that we observe, Beverly Crusher, his true and only wife that he'll ever have, is away, and the nanny that he is quite clearly boffing is helping them set the table. This is everything that Picard has ever wanted. However, subconsciously, he knows that he has failed his mission and likely everyone on the planet is dead. Thankfully, he likely didn't know about Riker's inability to beat a Klingon ship that was so old it probably also fought against the Enterprise A. So he won't know that he also failed all of his crew and that they're all now dead. But regardless, due to his inner guilt at failing everyone else, he begins to see hints that the timeline he's in right now isn't real. All of a sudden, Guinan makes an appearance and claims to be an echo or ghost. According to her, when you enter into the Nexus, it takes something away from you. While this certainly might explain the odd behavior of Soren and Guinan at times, it's as likely, if not more so, that all of this is just a projection by Picard's psyche. He can't accept and let himself be happy, so the Nexus accommodates that. The Guinan projection tells him that he can travel anywhere in time. This allows him to stop Soren. However, he's not able to do it alone, so who else is going to help him but that of the great Captain James T. Kirk? Picard meets Kirk in what the OG captain would consider to be his own heaven and convinces the man that he doesn't need to live in paradise but has to be a Starfleet officer one more time.
No, you can never make that by yourself. We have to work together.
We are working together. Trust me.
Good luck, Captain.
Call me Jim.
Not just that, Picard is so convincing and impressive that Kirk insists that Picard call him Jim, showing that the captain of the Enterprise D has impressed the greatest hero of the Federation. Picard and Kirk battle Sauron and win. Unfortunately, Kirk dies and Picard buries him and is given accolades and allowed to continue his trek among the stars. But let me ask you this, which makes more sense? That a phenomenon that can literally create any universe so intricate you'd never be able to discern if it is real or not, has constructed this plot focused around Picard to let him live out his fantasy and let him see what he believes he deserves, or he actually found a Guinan projection who told him to go to search out Kirk. Once finding Kirk, he is so convincing that he talks the hero of the Federation out of staying in heaven to help him correct his biggest failure. During this time, Kirk connects with Picard and ultimately the captain is able to save the civilization and his own ship. And that he is such a hero that Kirk insists that Picard call him Jim. Also, if you look at what Picard's adventures past this point are, everything that happens around him is connected to the fact that Picard is getting old, that he wasted his youth in some ways, and that everything is going to end at some point in the near future for him. These are the exact issues that the captain had with the loss of Renee and the realization that the Picard line will end right before he went into the ribbon. Hell, let's break down the movies. While First Contact does have the weakest connection, we do see that Picard once again is fighting the Borg. The Borg travel back in time to stop First Contact and prevent the Federation from ever forming. This movie presents a technology that the Borg have not ever been shown to have. Additionally, they decide to use this time-traveling device at Earth as a last resort. This doesn't make much sense. We also see the introduction of the Queen, a character that fundamentally changes the Borg and was never discussed before. This all seems abrupt and makes very little sense. And before he even learns of all of this, Starfleet tells him that he cannot be the captain of the Enterprise, that he's useless to them when fighting the Borg. This all seems abrupt and makes very little sense unless it was the subconscious of Picard, where he believes that Starfleet has realized that he's grown old, that he's no longer useful, where he then fights the Borg who go back in time to change the past from events that occurred, just like Picard might have wanted to make future events different. In theory, this could be him just regretting his future being drastically different.
How old are you?
If we continue on and take a look at Star Trek Insurrection, the Enterprise literally finds a planet that restores youth and prevents death. The villains want to take all of this away from innocent people and use it for their own nefarious designs, which the bad guys also include Starfleet once again in this instance. He has to align with people that have forsaken technology so that they can keep their youth. He even relates with the villain, admitting that they're getting too old for all of this. Again, he's presented with children that remind him of Renee. And then in Nemesis, he literally is confronted with his younger self. This shows a darker part of him that wishes to live forever and has taken a different path, the way he could have went if he had decided to betray his ideals, his humanity. The actions of his evil self make very little sense, and ultimately the one being who was thought to be immortal, Data, gives his life to save Picard specifically. This touches base with Picard's need to be immortal and the inability to do so. It also shows that Data can die as well, that everything withers to dust. And this leads into the events of Star Trek Picard, into his future. Now, let's take a look at the show Star Trek Picard. I'm about to spoil the entire series, so this is where the video should probably end for you if you don't want that to happen. Let me know your thoughts up to this point if you're going to stop. In Star Trek Picard, the former captain is living his final days. The last years of his life were not as grandiose as the beginning. The captain became an admiral and spearheaded a Federation-wide attempt to save Romulans when their empire began crumbling due to a space ribbon coming into Romulan space and... Hey! Anyway, this all would be stopped by an organization known as the Zhat Vash, a super secretive collective that was even more terrifying than the Tal Shiar. This organization is able to gain operational control of Starfleet security, engage in operations where Starfleet captains are forced to kill people or their entire ship is destroyed, and orchestrates the destruction of all life and starship building operations on Mars. During all of this, Picard is able to determine what has happened, brings a motley crew together, using money, and is able to single-handedly stop the head of Starfleet security, then expose her, and welcome in a new species into the fold. Oh, and stop a universe-ending octopus from destroying everything. There are just some issues with what we see here. First, in all of this, where is Section 31? Why weren't they able to stop the corruption of Starfleet security? Maybe they weren't there because they didn't exist. At least not to Picard. As far as we know, the captain was never aware of that organization, and so his mind would not have created a reason for why they aren't there. Almost everything else can be explained, even the inclusion of Seven of Nine. Her presence would have possibly been known by the time of generations. So, the reason that the Zhat Vash defeated Starfleet security so easily is because, in Jean-Luc's mind, Section 31 never existed to stop them. This all being in his mind would also explain why the other rather dark and silly aspects of the show occur as well. And then it would all come down to the last episode, where Picard dies and is resurrected. Not only that, he gets to meet Data, who was never really dead. He was still alive as well. And Picard gets to talk to him to say goodbye. And now, after Data is finally gone and Picard has a new body, he learns that he doesn't have to live forever, but he could go on with a new body if he wanted. Though he probably won't live forever and the body's set to die, but maybe it won't, or you never know and you shouldn't live forever, blah, 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 blah. Looking at Picard's life after generations, it's almost fantastical. This world envelops him, and he has become something else and new from it. All of it seems like a fevered pitch dream, or maybe the Nexus is giving him what he wanted, or at least believed what he wanted. Now, I know there are some issues with this theory. We do see the sphere in Enterprise, but it's possible that perhaps that occurred both in the Nexus and in real life. Or maybe it's not the sphere that we see from First Contact. Maybe it was really another ship from the Borg. At the end of the day, I'm not convinced that I believe this theory, but I do think it's interesting. All of these are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.